Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. Dr. Kyle Mox here, Associate Dean for National Scholarships and Director of the Office of National Scholarships Advisement. Today is our final installment of Fellowships Fridays, and today we're going to be talking about harsh truths that will make you a better fellowships applicant. So all the things that you wanted to hear, or maybe didn't know that you wanted to hear, but advisors would love to tell you. So join today by the bulk of the staff from ANSA, so we've got a lot of great perspectives on it. So I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves. So Dr. Hobson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mitch Hamza, and I advise primarily on fellowships that support graduate study and research.
Great. Dr. Bhattacharya.
Hello, I'm Dr. Neelantana Bhattacharya, and I am one of the faculty mentors. I teach at Barrett, and I also advise the Killam and Fulbright UK Summer Institutes.
Wonderful. And Shay.
Hello, everybody. I'm Shay Masterson. I'm the Program Manager of Outreach and Inclusion in ANSA, and I do general advising for undergraduate students as well as advise on a variety of mostly undergraduate scholarship and fellowship opportunities.
Great. And Dr. Stoff.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Laurie Stuff. I'm Assistant Director of the Office of National Scholarship Advisement. I'm also a Barrett faculty member, and I advise on all things related to critical language study, Fulbright Summer Institutes in the UK, Boren, CLS, all kinds of fun things like that.
Wonderful. Well, to temper your expectations, we have exactly 15 harsh truths for you today. And so to get things kicked off, first, we want to tell you that your priorities are all wrong. The reasons that you're doing this probably aren't the right reasons. A lot of people come and they want to apply for the Rhodes Scholarship because it's the one they've heard of. I get that a lot. And or they get fixed on a certain name, or they get fixed on adding this to their resume. The actual winning of the fellowship isn't the outcome, right? It's the process that's the outcome. That's kind of how we think about it, So a lot of students want to know right off the bat, do you think I could win a Rhodes Scholarship? And they're asking the wrong question. The right question is, how can I become the sort of person who could win a Rhodes Scholarship? Because like I said, the process of applying, the process of getting yourselves into a position where you're competitive for certain awards is obviously going to pay tremendous benefits in a lot of other places in life. If you are the sort of person who's a very strong Fulbright applicant or a very strong Boren applicant, you're probably going to do okay in a lot of other areas. So the overemphasis on winning, oddly enough, is not the right priority, as opposed to how can I get the most out of this process? And we feel if you do the work well, you're going to get a good outcome, whether that's immediately or in the longer term. You'll be pleased with the results eventually.
So harsh truth number 2, nobody cares. Now, that doesn't mean literally nobody cares about you or anything you do. We care about you and your process and development. But in reality, the reader, the selection panel, the folks who are deciding who wins these awards doesn't really care about very generic reasons that you want to do the fellowship, or very personal reasons that you want to go to that country. They want to know something a little bit more compelling about why you want to do this thing, how you're going to do this thing, how you're going to benefit, how the world's going to benefit. So having some kind of general heritage connection to another country, I'm Irish. Both of my parents are predominantly Irish. That's not a compelling enough reason for a foundation or for the federal government to foot the bill for me to go to Ireland for a summer or a year, right? So having a heritage connection to the country, that kind of personal connection of why you want to go there, having a general passion or interest in that country's food or music or culture, right? These are the kinds of things that the reader does not care about in terms of deciding whether to select you over all of the other applicants hundreds or thousands of other applicants for this particular opportunity. So your meanderings about, oh, it would be so wonderful to walk around Oxford University, and I've always imagined myself doing this, right? These are the kinds of things that, in reality, the reader of your application is not going to care too much about, and won't lead to you usually being selected for the award.
Absolutely. And to add to that, I would also push the idea that the world doesn't necessarily care about you, but it cares about what you can offer the world. So you need to make it clear that you receiving this award or opportunity would put something of value into the world. You would be able to solve a problem. You would be able to share new knowledge. You would be able to help people if you were to win this award. So again, nobody really cares so much about your individual reasons for wanting to do things in terms of what they get out of it. One thing that we hear all the time is, oh, sorry, I've been busy. When we ask, well, where have you been? I haven't heard from you in a couple of weeks, or hey, I've expected to get some drafts from you. And we hear that a lot. Sorry, I've been busy. I'll tell you this, don't ever tell a grown person with a full-time professional job that you're busy. All right. They're busy, we're all busy, everyone's busy. What advisors hear when you say, sorry, I've been busy, is that, sorry, I'm actually prioritizing X, Y, or Z over this fellowship process. Because in reality, that's what you mean. That there are other things that are more important than this, and that's fine. We'll be honest about that. But just know that we all generally work as hard as you work. We aren't going to run chasing applicants because we have plenty of applicants who are willing to sit down and prioritize something that has a very immediate deadline. It's going to require quite a bit of work to be competitive. So the more competitive they are, the harder the work needs to be. And again, you need to change around your priorities if you want to have a good chance of winning these things, right? Nobody gets lucky. There's no lottery involved here. So it all comes down to the amount of effort that you're willing to put into it. Does that mean you have to tank your grades or quit work? No, but we'd be willing to wager that you can rearrange your time in a way that would make this a more productive experience. Dr. Hobson.
Sure. So I think one thing that's really important to keep in mind with all the advice that we're giving you today, where we're saying like, don't do this, don't do that, you probably will still do it in your first draft. And that's okay. Your first draft is going to suck. And that's just something to prepare yourself for. I often tell students that I will pay them $1,000 out of my own pocket if they write a first draft that stupefies me with its perfection. I have nothing to say about it. It's the Dr. Hobson Memorial Scholarship. I've never given that money out. It does not happen. So don't put that expectation on yourself that it's going to be perfect. Rather, the first draft is the offering we make to the writing gods in order to have a conversation about what the writing should look like. So get the first draft done as quickly as you can. Get back into the office, have a conversation about it, and keep proceeding with the process because it's not going to be perfect the first time, and we don't expect it to be.
I would also say, don't be afraid to share that first draft with us. A lot of students are like, oh, I don't want you to see this terrible work that I've done, but that's okay. We're used to it, and we're not going to judge you, and we're there to help you. So please do share your first drafts with us.
Yes. Yeah, I often compare it to you're deciding on what color to paint the walls of a house that we might just knock down. So let's just go ahead and get started. One place a lot of people get started when they're writing a personal essay or a personal narrative is their childhood. But the harsh truth is that your childhood was probably not that interesting. Even as far as many applicants will say, I had a typical childhood. And then as a reader, I'm wondering, well, then why are you telling me about it? Considering that you are in a pool of many other college age or older students, all of whom are vying for thousands of dollars, the likelihood that anything interesting happened to you, anything that happened more than 2 years ago is interesting to the readers is unlikely. They'd really like to know more about your recent activities, the leadership roles you played, how you came to realize, what major or what career you wanted to pursue, or more so why you want this particular award. And so oftentimes we get committed to starting the story at the beginning, and we read about what happened in kindergarten or first grade all the way through high school, and then we have about 100 words left to talk about college. We would really encourage you to focus on the more immediate and prioritize things that are relevant to this purpose, and then fill in backstory as necessary. So just keep in mind, you're one of 1,000 people applying for this, and most people have fairly similar background experiences, right? Particularly if they're ending up in the same place. And so you have that in common with your other applicants. Shay?
We often hear, especially in those first drafts, I have always wanted to blank. I've always wanted to be a foreign service officer. I've always wanted to be a doctor. I've always wanted to help people with, you know, X problem or issue in the world. The reality is none of us, you know, came out of the womb with the desire to do a specific career or even have a specific impact with our career. And in reality, most times as kids, our vision of our future is probably not just not what we'll end up doing, but maybe not even something that we could end up being, you know, like this lovely child. I just want to be a mailbox, or I want to be a space cowboy, right? These kinds of things that we said when we were children. Sometimes some people identify an actual career path or impact they want to have as a child, and they, in some form or fashion, follow through with that. But even still, there's usually an inciting incident or a series of things that you've gone through in your life, experienced, observed, interactions you've had with other folks that have ultimately led to why you want to do X thing or why you want to have this impact. And so try to refrain from, I've always wanted to be, or I've always wanted to do this thing, and do some more reflection, do a little bit more digging in your own mind, emotions, history, and think about that event or those series of events that you've experienced that have kind of led to this. And somewhere in there, we might find a more interesting and compelling thing to include in your statement.
All right, so if you have to tell the reader that you're passionate, you might not actually be that passionate, right? So if I say, hi, I'm Dr. Habza, and I'm passionate about rhetorical empathy, what does that communicate to you about my research area and my relationship to it? Not very much, right? We're all brimming with passion. Our cups overflow with passion. When I was at Purdue, we often would tell applicants, you know, passion and love, best reserved for romance novels and not fellowships applications. And the reason for that is it's really hard for readers to measure who is passionate, right? So if everyone in their application says, I am passionate about theoretical mathematics, I want to share my passion for the psychohistory of surrealism with other people. If everyone says it in their applications, then there's no real way to understand what their relationship is to their research, what their relationship is to the impact that they want to have. Instead, you want to show rather than tell that passion. Tell a story about how you discovered that research area. Tell a story about the kind of impact that you want to have and why it matters to you. By really digging deeper, you can go much further than just the surface level claim of, I am passionate about this. And that actually stops the conversation from going further and really sharing with your readers who you are.
Shay?
So, you know, another harsh truth, right? It is the title of today's session. So the things that you think are really impressive about your background, about your experience, about your accomplishments, probably aren't all that impressive, at least not on their own to the reader, in part because, you know, many other applicants, most other applicants, maybe even all other applicants can say the same thing as what you're saying is that really impressive thing. So earning, you know, a 4.0 or above GPA in the grand scheme of things, you know, just at ASU, hundreds of students are honored every year at graduation for earning a 4.0 or above after 8 consecutive semesters of undergraduate studies, right? That's ASU alone. Hundreds of students can say that. So when you're talking about a fellowship where across the country or across the world, they're only going to select 50 or 100 scholars or fellows, that 4.0 GPA may be part of the package, not that impressive in its totality. Along with that, having some kind of accolades for your GPA or membership in an honor society that's directly related to, I just did well academically. They want to see your strong academics, but there's much more that you're going to need to have in your experience and show the readers of your application in order for them to be impressed by that. You can have some kind of official title as part of a club or organization or in a position that you hold, like a community assistant or resident assistant or the president of X club or the chair of this committee. And thousands, if not tens of thousands of students across the country can say, I hold that title. I've held that title, right? So again, you need to show a little bit more about within that role, what have you done to develop as a leader, to show that you have the skills and the capacity to have a positive impact on others. And that might be through something with one of those titles that you've held, maybe not. Oftentimes our strongest leaders in the room are the ones that don't have the official title. So you can have those titles or you cannot. And either way, the title itself isn't going to be that impressive overall. Some other things that aren't going to be that impressive to the reader when you're talking about hundreds or thousands of applicants who can say similar or the same things without further explaining how you've had the your intended impact or outcome through those kinds of activities that you've engaged in. So, you know, as is the theme emerging, dig a little deeper as you're reflecting and writing in these kinds of applications.
Kind of building on that, you aren't that special, right? There are millions and millions and millions and millions of people on the planet Earth. And many of them, I actually like to think are more similar than they are different. And so we've actually read essays that are so surface level and so generic, we actually can't tell if ChatGPT wrote them or not. And that's because the applicant didn't push beyond the obvious or push beyond the first thing that came to mind. And that's fine. Well, we don't want you to scare you off from writing a first draft, but anticipate that next draft we're going to go deeper, right? A lot of applicants will use the frame, well, I'm trying to seem like I'm the most unique applicant. And first off, that's not how unique works, right? You can't be the most unique. Either you are one of a kind or you're not. But when we start throwing in adjectives like curious, stands to reason that all the other applicants who are applying for a similar award, let's say that's the Goldwater Scholarship or the NSF, which are both for STEM majors who are involved in research, curiosity is probably going to be a value shared by 98% of the other applicants, or else they wouldn't have become scientists, right? And so if you're committed to service and you're applying for the Truman, that makes you the norm, not the outlier. And so you can't just tell people that you're hardworking or that you're committed or that you're this or you're that. Again, you've got to illustrate it by demonstrating and pointing at the things that you've done that will show them what you do that's special or different. So again, you can't tell me that you're special or different because the chances are good that, you know, of this pool of 1,000, there's going to be another applicant that's similar to you. And so what we really work hard with you to do is to make yourself seem like a real live, living and breathing human being on the other side of that paper who has specific hopes and dreams and has value to add to the world, not just a list of experiences, right? That are probably shared by many other people in the pool. Dr. Hauser? Or Shane?
Yeah, I can take it.
Yeah.
All right. So one thing that we often encounter when we're working with applicants, sometimes applications have prompts that are like, tell us about a challenge that you overcame and how you overcame it. And sometimes that can be interpreted as, I have to talk about some kind of personal trauma or a bad thing that's happened to me, or I think my readers want to hear something traumatizing that happened to me. And many times that's brought up as concern. Like applicants are like, I don't know if I want to share that about myself. And you don't actually have to share that about yourself. You don't have to share any of that information. If something did happen to you that is compelling and is the reason why you have made certain decisions to have a certain impact in the world, you can keep that down to one sentence, is something that we've heard from reviewers for these kinds of applications. And keeping it to one sentence tells them shortly what happened to you. That helps motivate you, but they really want to care about change. They really want to hear about change. That's what I meant to say. And how you're moving forward and going to make that kind of impact. So they want to know more about motivations, and you don't actually have to share with them bad things that have happened to you. And we don't want to ever put an applicant in a position where they feel that they have to do that.
Okay.
So as you're working on your application package, you really can't assume that the reader has looked at any specific part of your application. You can't assume that they've read it in the particular order of how you needed to complete it, right? You know, question 1, question 2, part A, part B. They're not necessarily going to look at your application package in that order. They're not necessarily going to look at every part of your application package. So you don't want to repeat yourself a bunch throughout each, part of an application, but it's okay to reference similar things and do so in a way that's not going to assume that they've already read it, but not repeat yourself either. Just because you've written it, just because a referee has written a letter of recommendation to you, doesn't guarantee that an individual panelist on a selection committee is going to have read that part, or at least not read it in depth. So they might have skimmed, question 1 and skipped ahead to question 5. They might have skimmed the letters of recommendation to see what you, the applicant, said yourself, or vice versa. So don't make any assumptions about what they do or don't already know about you throughout your application. And this goes even further, like if you go to an interview for a fellowship. Sometimes those panelists have reviewed your application in depth before that panel interview, and sometimes they've gotten it just 30 minutes before, so they maybe skimmed it, but they haven't read it in depth. And sometimes, again, maybe they've only looked at one part of the application. So you can't make these assumptions about what the reader is already going to know about you, or the interviewer is already going to know about you based on anything you've already submitted or worked on.
One other thing.
And also,
sorry, go ahead.
So that also goes to, like, we're often saying, don't bury the lead, right? So don't leave the most compelling part of your argument for, why you want to do this thing, how you're going to have this kind of impact, why they should select you over the hundreds or thousands of other applicants. Don't leave that at the very end, because if they haven't, if you haven't pulled them in to you as an applicant in the beginning, even stronger chances they're not going to have made it all the way to the end of that individual statement or that whole application, right? So begin with your strongest argument, and or what they tell you to begin with. Always follow directions, regardless of what any advice you hear from us or otherwise. If an application, a prompt, whatnot gives you specific directions of what to include in certain parts or how to start, always follow those directions, regardless of anything else. But in general, you want to get the most compelling information earliest on in an individual statement or application package.
And we totally understand if you don't know what that is on your first draft. Don't bury the lead is probably one of the most common comments I give on first drafts, and sometimes you have to write your way into that. So that's why it's really important to commit to revision, because then you can figure out, okay, where is my most compelling part? The other assumption I would like to discourage you of is that your letters of recommendation are going to get turned in on their own and they're going to be great and they're going to be enthusiastic. Where if you attended our earlier Friday session on how to cultivate good letters of recommendation, you know that you should pay attention to the timeline and you should be sure that you give people a way to say no if they're really not that enthusiastic about writing this letter, and that you can actually contribute a lot to that process. And so the only only marginally better than no letter of recommendation is an unenthusiastic, vague letter of recommendation, right? So we want to be sure that we get strong ones and don't assume everything's just going to turn out if you don't actually manage that relationship a little bit. Dr. Hobson?
So I think one thing we all hear, and something I resonate with as a writer, is I hear writers often say, I do my best under pressure, right? Like if I just wait till the last minute, I'm going to get the best draft possible written the night before. And that's not quite the goal with what we're doing here, right? So oftentimes when we're writing final projects, it's not the best writing conditions. There's 4 of them due all on the same day, and we have to write them in 1 week, right? And so we just kind of write what we can, submit it, and see what happens. However, with a fellowships application, that's not really the goal. We're not just submitting something to see what happens. And so really putting in the work beforehand, having meetings with us, putting the work into the revisions, getting feedback on how you implemented those revisions, working with both us and faculty mentors to get feedback is the best way to approach a competitive application, because that's what we're trying to get at. We can't guarantee that anyone can win anything, but we can say we have put as much work as we can into putting together a competitive application that best represents your talents and ambitions. And that's not going to happen at the last minute.
Yeah, I can't stress this enough, because I hear this all the time, not only from fellowships applicants, but also from students. No one is born a great writer. There is no such thing, right? You don't just come out of the womb with talent for writing. Writing takes practice, practice, practice. That means revision, revision, revision. So just keep saying that to yourself. Good writing is revision, revision, revision. And you have to give yourself enough time to do that. It's also a really good way for those who are daunted by the process of writing, who feel like, oh, I'm not a good writer, I'm dreading this process. If you wait to the last minute, that makes it all the worse, right? So the earlier you get started, the more times you go through revisions, get feedback, then the stronger your writing is going to be.
I would even add to that, even if you feel like you are a good writer already, this oftentimes is the first time you're doing this kind of writing. So although I encourage you to also do revision for the kind of writing for courses that you already feel like you're good at, but just kind of furthering, most students, even if you have lots of practice writing already for like academic courses and whatnot, or even doing like online blogs or whatever the case is, you're not necessarily doing fellowship application writing on a regular basis. So it may require even more revision than what you're used to get to where you have that really strong, compelling statement.
About to say, our sense of due dates means that we think that things that are not in the week ahead are far, 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 far off. And obviously that's never the case. When you're making a meeting with us and you make it a couple days before the fellowship is due and your meeting is for the first time, there's only so much that we can tell you at that point. And I'm always frustrated when I find students who are coming in that want me to tell them that their draft is amazing and just send it off, but it's not. And I have to figure out what can I tell them that is manageable to do. But obviously, if they had started this like 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, and we had met, we would have had so much more time to develop things and to come up with a stronger draft. So do plan ahead. Don't look at the felt deadline and sort of think, oh, this is in 2 weeks, I can start working on it then.
And I think a lot of this comes from the reality that in the academy and at college, we often don't produce good writing. We produce good enough writing, meaning that it's good enough to get a B, which is fine. Good. I wrote it the night before. I've never failed a class. Apparently, I'm a good writer. And if you go on to graduate school, you'll find the truth, right? I learned the truth very harshly in my first week of my MFA program that I was not, in fact, a great writer. I was good enough to get in, but having to change the process and plan and give time for revision was what was necessary. So, and here's the thing: you got to learn how to deal with failure. If you never attempt anything unless the outcome is assured, you're going to have a kind of a boring life, right? Most of us are losers. We've all lost. We've all failed at a lot of things. You've got to get used to it, right? And you've got to make peace with rejection, or else you're going to be hamstrung and paralyzed by fear for the rest of your life. This includes jobs. It includes graduate programs. And, getting rejection is actually not failure. It's a form of feedback. It's another way of hearing not yet, right? Maybe it wasn't the right opportunity for you. Maybe the timing wasn't right. Maybe if you look at yourself in the mirror, maybe you didn't put as much work into this as you could have, or as was needed for as competitive as this was. If we just throw up our hands and say, well, that's it, I'm no good, I'm never trying again, then that's the failure, right? So we've all had multiple failures, and after years of doing this, I'm still disappointed every time I think a student who has worked really hard and put in the effort and chosen a good opportunity does not get selected. But we have to remind ourselves that the odds are never in your favor when it comes to these fellowships. There is no fellowship that has a more than 50% selection rate. Everything is actually quite the opposite. So that's not the reason to not apply, though. Right. And in all reality, the more failure you have, the more learning you get to experience. And so we really encourage people, fail early, fail often, fail multiple times, because that's one of the best things you can learn. And the other harsh truth is that you're probably overthinking it. High achieving students, the sorts of people who go after fellowships like this that have high ambitions, do tend to think a lot about things. Is it possible to overthink? I do think it's possible to overthink, right? And we say this all the time: apply or don't, right? Because what tends to happen is people come in and they start asking a lot of hypothetical questions, and they want to know about what's the actual selection rate and what type font should I use, and do you think I should include this? Do you think I should do that? Apply or don't, right? And what we mean by that is you really just need to sit down and start writing in order to figure out if this is going to work well or not. Many times we have applicants who will start a process months before the deadline, write a couple drafts, and then come to the realization, like, you know what? I don't think I have very good reasons for this. I don't think this is a good place to put my energy right now. Maybe I'll come back to it later. Or they say, you know what, this isn't working in this direction. Let me step back and go a different direction. So a lot of it comes down to actually just doing the work. And there is some frustration in an applicant that is indecisive, yet still wants to occupy 30-minute advising sessions that other students could have used, or wants you to look at drafts that ultimately they're never going to submit. We just, we'll commit if you commit. And, I understand you have questions. That's our job, is to answer questions. But at a certain point, we've got to press the apply button, right? And start drafting and start writing. And that's the best guidance I can give, is like, just start, and then we'll see where it leads. And Dr. Hausen?
This is the final one, right?
This is the final one.
The big finale. Okay, so what we really want you all to know as we close out today is that you need help, right? Along with what Dr. Mox was just saying about not overthinking it. You might sit down at a first draft and you're like, oh, I can't use passion. I can't use a childhood story. Where do I get started, right? Well, just get started, get something down on paper, get that bad first draft together, and then we will give you feedback to help you work through those things. If you use the word passion, fine. We'll give you feedback on how to work through that and fix that, and how to move past that. And so you need help, and we are here to help. And one thing that I think is so important to communicate to students is you shouldn't suffer in silence. If you are meeting obstacles, if you're like, I really don't know how to get past this, ask for help, voice your needs, advocate for yourself, right? We're working with a lot of applicants, and it's important for you to communicate to us what your needs are so that we can best help you overcome the barriers you're facing in your application.
One of the most frequent emails I get is, can I have more information about this, please? which is unhelpful. It makes me feel like a veterinarian, that someone's brought me a sick dog and I have no information about, what's wrong with the dog. Ask specific questions. Like I said, it is our job to answer questions, but again, we need some information from you in terms of, okay, where are you in the process? What do you already know? What do you not know? What do you need to know to get started? What do you need from me at this point? Because it can't be everything, because that can get overwhelming for you. So let's figure out, what's the best strategy and start from there. This is a screenshot of the ONSA website. I assume you've been there if you've appeared here at this information session. But a couple of resources that you should be aware of, we have our scholarship database there. It's an excellent place to start because, again, when students start reaching out to us to schedule meetings, we expect that they have some scholarships in mind that they'd like to explore. They might not be the right ones. They might not be the ones you ultimately apply for, but at least gives us some sense of the kinds of things you're looking for. When you're ready to make appointments, you don't need to email us or ask what our availability is. You can just schedule it right through the website, and our calendars are up to date. And again, if you're not sure what type of appointment to schedule, just reach out or just try anything, right? And we'll sort it out. It's our job to untangle confusion. If you haven't subscribed to the weekly bulletin, I think it's a great thing to do because that will let you know when these deadlines are out. And we are unveiling deadlines and timelines and announcing the opening of certain awards in the timeline that we would recommend, right? So if you see in the bulletin, like, hey, this award just opened up, that's your signal that now is the time to get started on it. And even though that deadline is 3 months away, there's a reason why we're highlighting that now. So I think it's helpful for you all to manage your timelines as well. And thinking about timelines, we are about to enter into the start of our major cycle. Just as everyone else is looking forward to the end of the school year, we are actually going up that first hill on the roller coaster. So we're starting to look at these major deadlines. And for those of you that might be interested in some of the major awards like Marshall and Rhodes, you should be aware that most of these big major awards that have nomination requirements have very early deadlines because we need to know who's in and who's out. So there is an intent to apply deadline for the Marshall and Rhodes at April, even though the final deadline isn't until September. And our other biggest award process, everyone here helps applicants for this one. March 27 is Fulbright Day at ASU. And so this is where we'll be providing updates about the program, providing information about the basic strategies, basically giving you all the information you need to get started. And that'll also include a panel discussion of Fulbright alumni from ASU and followed up with a small reception that you can talk to other applicants who have done this before. You can talk to us and get a better sense of this. So again, you can see we're right now, just yesterday was the first award made for this Fulbright cycle. So the first student found out that they got a Fulbright award. They began the process last March, right? And so just to give you some sense of how long some of these timelines can actually be. So we really encourage people to get started at the end of March. Well, wonderful. We have saved plenty of time for questions. If anyone has any questions or as you're gathering your thoughts, if any of my colleagues have anything we wanted to add or any other bits of advice or any harsh truths that we forgot to share. Well, if anyone does have any questions, you're welcome to pop them in the chat or unmute yourself.
I have one thing that I would add about not assuming things, and that is Shay mentioned making sure that you are answering the questions that the application is asking and not assuming that you have something more interesting that you'd rather tell them rather than directly answer the question. The key to getting fellowships and scholarships is telling the audience what they want to hear, not what you think is more interesting or better for them to hear. So don't assume that, just because you feel like you don't have a strong answer to the specific question that you can replace it with something else. Instead, come to us and we'll help you strategize a way to effectively answer that question and make sure you're telling them what they do want to hear.
Yeah, Henry Kissinger once said, don't answer the question they ask you, answer the question you wish they'd asked you. That does not apply to fellowships, right? You need to answer the question that they asked you.
It's just going to add that whenever you see somebody win a really prestigious fellowship, it's very impressive, and we assume that person has been doing things amazingly all their life, and everything has always been brilliant. But it's actually always the case that they've applied for so many things,
Mhm.
and some of those things they haven't gotten. So the only way that you can actually get anything, as we've been trying to tell you, is that you need to apply to things over and over again, and sooner or later something will probably come your way, but you have to get used to failing, because that's how people win in the end.
Very good advice. Good. Any questions or comments? Well, good. Well, as I mentioned, we'll be following up with everyone who registered for this event with a link to this video on our YouTube page. And as well, you'll find somebody had asked, where can I find our other archive presentations? The other Fellowship Fridays presentations are archived there, as well as all of our other presentations from this past year. So you're welcome to take a look at those. And if you have any specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And again, apply or don't. But just know, and I think a lot of ASU students are often surprised to learn how deep the support structures are in our office, right? We're willing to work as hard as you have, and I hope you understand that Harsh Truth was really just a marketing gimmick to get people to this event. We aren't harsh people at all. We're actually quite supportive, and so we look forward to seeing that awful first draft, and we look forward to seeing the submitted draft as well. So. Thank you, colleagues, and everyone have a wonderful weekend.